Hi, this is Lisa Medved, and this is my final module for EDL 850 School Law. This is a case study in internet use violations. After reading the case, I determined what I know. I know Ms. Walker is a second-tier teacher with very high expectations for achievement and rigor for her classes. Dr. Forbes is a veteran principal with numerous honors. The neighborhood in which the high school is located is affluent, with parents who are concerned over low grades. Dr. Forbes has received a variety of complaints about Ms. Walker and has attempted to advise her on how to positively interact with students and reduce their stress. Ms. Walker has not acted on the advice, and her classroom remains unchanged. Ms. Walker received an anonymous email with a link to a website where numerous comments impugned her character and classes. One post asked, "Who wants Ms. Walker to disappear?" Dr. Forbes has viewed and printed both the email and web page. He has advised Ms. Walker that he believes it is a prank. He and Ms. Walker will speak to a suspected student and his friends to see if they have any information and bring in a technologist to help if necessary. So what do I need to know? I would like to know who sent the email and why, who set up the web page, what was the main content and intent of the web page, who commented on the web page, and who made the malicious comments about Ms. Walker's personal behavior and the desire for her to disappear. So the primary problem is that someone set up a web page about Ms. Walker that allowed maliciously defaming comments about Ms. Walker's character and a malicious comment suggesting that she should disappear. Depending on who is responsible, this could violate the school district internet use policy and possibly state or federal laws regarding defamation and libel. So here is my plan of action to resolve the primary problem. Number one, I will call in a variety of students from each class and probe for information regarding the email and web page. I will follow up on any suggestions students give. Number two, I will contact the district technologist if necessary to determine the origin of the email, web page, and comments on the web page. Number three, if a person or persons can be identified, I will proceed with appropriate consequences or punishment according to policy. Number four, regardless of whether a person is held responsible, I will call all students into an assembly for a reminder on internet use policies, laws surrounding internet use, and possible consequences if policies or laws are violated. So here are my strategies as I implement my plan. As I conference with students, I will call in students from each of Ms. Walker's classes. Even though Randy and his friends were suggested to be responsible by Ms. Walker, I will not treat them any differently from other students. I will use the conferences to gather information only. I will not use the time to make accusations. I will allow a day or two to pass after finishing conferences to allow any more students to come forward or revisit. If any names are mentioned, I will follow up with those students to see if any responsibility is taken. Strategies for implementing step two, contact the district technologist. If student conferences do not yield any information regarding who is responsible, I will contact the district technologist. I will ask as whether or not he or she is able to determine the origin of the email, web page, or comments, and whether or not any of it originated on district equipment. If so, I will have him proceed. This step may be necessary even if names are produced during conferences, but no one actually takes responsibility, so more inquiry is necessary. Strategies for step three, proceed with consequences. If students are found to be responsible or claim responsibility for the web page or malicious comments on the web page, school or district policy must be followed. This may result in a variety of scenarios depending on the circumstances, but could include suspension or expulsion. If a parent or non-employee of the school is responsible for the web page or malicious comments, law enforcement may be contacted if Ms. Walker wishes to press charges. Strategies for step four, the student assembly. Regardless of if anyone is held responsible for the web page or comments, an assembly will be held. It will refresh students on the internet use policy and laws surrounding internet use and defamation. It will also address handling situations that they may not like and developing perseverance. Ms. Walker will not be mentioned specifically. The assembly will be held in the spirit of keeping students from making mistakes that might cause damage to their future endeavors. It will also encourage mature reactions to situations they may not like, but will have to endure. So as I solved this situation, I kept in mind what was best for students. What was best for students is to be treated fairly, to learn how to appropriately handle issues, even if the issue is not resolved in a preferred way, to learn the consequences of violating policy, and to learn possible consequences of using the internet inappropriately on their futures. So I used the 4 examples from the case as rationale for my resolution. For the conferences, it was unclear as to who was responsible for the malicious posts. A fair and unbiased investigation was in order. Students were treated fairly and without prejudice despite unsubstantiated claims by Ms. Walker about Randy and his friends. Consequences. Students who violated school and district policy by creating the web page and posting malicious comments and veiled threats will be held accountable according to the procedure laid out in this policy. This will allow students to see that the consequences in policy do matter. For the assembly, students will still be encouraged to report violations of school policy or law to administration, and that will be taken very seriously. However, the past complaints lodged against Ms. Walker over the past year were not violations of school policy. They were not immoral or illegal. This, of course, will not be said to the students during the assembly, but more my rationale behind it. Personality and pedagogical differences where no policy or law is violated is an opportunity to practice perseverance. She's tough, but students will encounter many tough people in their lives, and they must learn to endure and adapt when it's not a matter of moral or legal violation. It is in the student's best interest to learn this lesson. In addition, the assembly students will be reminded of internet use policy and that it must be followed. Violations may result in consequences that may affect them in their futures. And it sounds as though many of these students and their families are very concerned about their futures. It is in their best interest to be aware of these policies so as not to violate them. So, what was I thinking when I was reading through this problem, this case? I was trying to remain open-minded and fair to both Ms. Walker and those responsible for the problem. As I read, of course, things wanted to pop into my mind, and I was very deliberate in trying not to make judgments in my own mind about what was happening. I thought that this was a very complicated problem, and it is, but I was thinking this is complicated as I was reading it. I also wondered if it was exacerbated by the ongoing problem that students and parents were having with Ms. Walker, or was this just sort of an isolated incident based on one thing, or was this, again, based on the complaints that Dr. Forbes had about her? As I worked through this problem, I was feeling sympathy for Ms. Walker's angst in the situation. I know if that were to happen to me, I would feel very upset and saddened when you pour so much time and effort into something and people, that to have that said about you would be very hurtful. I was concerned for Dr. Forbes as he prepared to deal with the students and parents. It caused me a little bit of anxiety for him and myself, as I was going to be the one working through the problem. I felt frustration when I thought about the horrible comments made on the webpage, just in general, not from Ms. Walker's perspective, but just frustration that's the way people often deal with things, anonymously and maliciously. So as I was working to resolve the problem, I valued fairness and truth. I wanted justice for Ms. Walker, but also justice for those who committed the act, and to maintain a sense of justice as far as my administration in following through the policy. And then I also wanted to make sure that there was growth through the whole problem and the resolution of the problem, that students were growing, that Ms. Walker was growing, and I was growing too as a aspiring principal, but in the situation that I was growing too and learning how I would handle the situation the next time I face it. So there are some unresolved issues or issues that could be investigated further. Ms. Walker's interactions and rapport with students, that's still unresolved. Nothing has changed as far as from her conversations with Dr. Forbes. Nothing justifies the webpage and the comments. However, it would help Ms. Walker in the future to develop more positive relationships with her students and parents. So probably following through with that and helping her to sort of develop that positive side. Some unresolved issues too, and it seems like this culture, this environment where the kids are in this high school, the student body seems very entitled. And when something gets hard, the parents are coming in and complaining about difficulty. And so I'm wondering if an issue that might need to be addressed is a stronger stance on complaints and sort of drawing the line between a moral and legal violation or just a preference. In this case, I feel like Ms. Walker was doing her due diligence in trying to challenge these kids in difficult classes, and that's her job. And as a principal, Dr. Forbes' job was to get someone in there to do those things. And in the end, those that rise to the top will be the ones that will be the valedictorian and salutatorian, and those that don't quite make it probably don't deserve to be at the valedictorian. Not that they're not wonderful, wonderful students, but someone has to be at the top. So it seems like that may need to be addressed. Probably not hard and fast, but more like a gradual rolling out of different way of thinking. Whether or not the email, the web page, or comments originated on the district equipment hasn't been determined, and it might warrant some further investigation. It seems like if it were on the district equipment, that violates an additional policy and some additional consequences might be in order. So as far as standard 5, an educational leader promotes the academic success and well-being of every student by adhering to ethical principles and professional norms. The way I promoted academic success for every student in this situation was that I treated students fairly and honestly, and I hopefully maintained the trust students and families instill in the school and its administration. And by doing that would make sure that the students are still trusting the school and so therefore can perform their best. Following through on consequences, students understand that actions have consequences, and promoted the idea that students need to sometimes endure a difficult situation when it boils down to something that's not a hard and fast rule. It's important that kids know this. I adhered to ethical principles and professional norms. I investigated fairly an incident brought to my attention by a teacher allegedly involving students. I did not make accusations without proof. I implemented a plan to deal with it, implemented a plan to prevent future incidences, and I protected the rights of the teacher and the students. And how I demonstrated a personal professional code of ethics. I withheld judgment until facts were determined. I kept the best interests of the students in mind with the nature of the investigation and tone of the instruction in the assembly. And I did not reprimand Ms. Walker for her high standards or rigor of instruction with students. Hard work students need to learn is a virtue that does not return void. So with that, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to practice problem solving with this case study. It was hard. I enjoyed it. It opened my eyes to very complicated issues with which principals unravel daily. The case reaffirmed in me that often there are many layers of a problem that are unseen, and I will keep that in mind as I go into my new school year when things seem so black and white when they really aren't. I just want to thank you again for your guidance through this course and the time you took with us.